Racist cop laughs at black woman in court until she reveals she works for the White House. On a humid summer morning in the bustling heart of downtown Washington, D.C., an unlikely drama was about to unfold inside a nondescript municipal courtroom. Whispers filled the air, thick with tension. A certain police officer, renowned for arrogant smirks and an attitude that had riled half the neighborhood, sat with a smug grin. Across the aisle, a poised black woman in a crisp suit gripped her notepad, her jaw set with determination. Nobody in the chamber suspected she was anything more than a typical traffic case defendant. But little did they know that this seemingly ordinary case would soon erupt into a scandal so shocking it could only happen under the nation's watchful eye. Ebony Davis woke up early, even before the first pink hues of dawn touched the sky over Capitol Hill. She lived in a tidy townhouse on a tree-lined street, not far from the heartbeat of Washington, D.C. Ebony's home was decorated with pieces of her family heritage, pictures of her grandparents who marched for civil rights. In the 1960s, her father's old law school books and her mother's carefully folded nurse's uniform. Every corner of the space radiated Ebony's dual passions, her fierce devotion to social justice and her unwavering sense of duty to her country. That Monday morning, Ebony had an important day at work. Though most of her neighbors assumed she held a standard federal job, Ebony was in fact a senior policy analyst for the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. Few realized how close she was to the seat of American power. In her line of work, Ebony often shifted between bureaucratic tasks and urgent, high-level policy discussions. She could be finalizing social services policy one day and advising on emergency legislation the next. Having once been a scholarship student at Howard University, Ebony was no stranger to high expectations and the pressure to excel. After brewing her usual cup of green tea, she began her morning routine. She gave a quick thought to a detail that had weighed heavily on her mind, a recent encounter with a police officer that had turned sour. A few days earlier, she had been pulled over for what the officer claimed was reckless driving. Ebony was stunned at the charge. She had signaled before switching lanes, and she was well under the speed limit. Yet the officer seemed determined to escalate a minor situation into something major. The tension during that stop was palpable. The memory still replayed in her mind, the officer's cold stare, the way he looked her up and down with an expression that, in Ebony's experience, suggested prejudice. She didn't think the policeman recognized her face from any major public events, nor did he notice the White House parking pass discreetly tucked into her dashboard that day. His focus was on her dark skin, the out-of-state license plate, and the idea that she must have been up to no good. Ebony had dealt with subtle and not so subtle racism before, but rarely did it leave her trembling with outrage for hours afterward. That morning, Ebony reminded herself she would soon have her day in court to contest the ticket. She brushed aside her anxiety, deciding to focus on work. Little did she know that this mundane traffic case was about to erupt into a spectacle more dramatic than any everyday nuisance. Fate was steering Ebony Davis toward a collision course with a man who believed his badge granted him power to trample anyone who looked like her. Officer Roy Carter walked into the precinct that same morning feeling unassailable. Having served on the force for almost 15 years, Carter believed he knew every trick in the book. He considered himself an old-school cop, a phrase he tossed around to justify his dismissive attitude toward complaints about excessive force or biased policing. More than once, his superiors had quietly settled civil suits out of court, accusations about Carter's questionable tactics. He had always escaped serious consequences due to a combination of departmental loyalty and a well-practiced ability to spin the narrative in his favor. Despite multiple run-ins that hinted at racial profiling, Carter's record officially gleamed with commendations for bravery and invaluable service. A handful of other officers viewed him with suspicion, while some rookies followed him like a cult hero, enamored with his take-no-prisoners approach. Still, Carter had been gradually building a more precarious reputation. Community members were growing tired of him, but fear and intimidation kept them silent. He relied on that silence. The day he pulled Ebony Davis over, Carter spotted a nice car with a black woman in the driver's seat and decided to investigate. He would never admit that this was the real reason he singled her out. In his mind, Ebony's every word polite, though it was reeked of defiance. He bristled when she kept calmly asking why she was being stopped. She didn't grovel or seem properly intimidated. She didn't call him sir enough times. Most of all, she had a quiet dignity, one he wanted to shatter. In court, he expected her to lose. He would lie if necessary. He had done it before, painting the suspect in the worst light, throwing out allegations of belligerence, claiming they resisted instructions. The system often turned a blind eye. So in the run-up to Ebony's trial date, Carter felt confident. He had already shared jokes about uppity people from out of town with a fellow officer. That's why, on the morning of the hearing, Carter's swagger was in full display. Little did he know that Ebony Davis was not just any defendant. Ebony's morning at the White House was a whirlwind. Her day began with a briefing on a new family assistance initiative that the administration was trying to push through Congress. She sat at a conference table in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, surrounded by other policymakers discussing data and demographic reports. Ebony offered nuanced insights, drawing upon her own life experiences and extensive community outreach. When she glanced at her watch, she noted the time for her court appearance was approaching. The hearing was set for the afternoon, so she politely excused herself before the meeting concluded. Rather than explaining her reason, she simply nodded at her immediate supervisor, Natalie Price, who knew of Ebony's predicament. Natalie offered Ebony a quick word of encouragement in the hallway. "You'll be fine," she said, giving Ebony's arm a gentle squeeze. "If you need me, call. You know the White House counsel's office has your back." That reassurance gave Ebony a spark of confidence. Nonetheless, Ebony wasn't naive. She knew that simply working at the White House wouldn't grant her immunity from prejudice. Far from it. She'd grown accustomed to people underestimating her, especially when she wasn't introduced with her title. Even with her credentials and job, Ebony lived in a world where one wrong assumption by a racist cop could escalate into severe consequences. She made her way out of the building, stepping briefly into the midday sun, a swirl of nerves and resolve. Before heading to the courthouse, she contacted her attorney, Marcus Green. He was a civil rights lawyer who had defended many people from marginalized communities, often pro bono. Ebony chose Marcus because of his integrity and his formidable reputation. He told Ebony to keep calm. "I've dealt with that officer before," he warned. "He doesn't always play fair. Remember, stay calm, stick to the facts, and let me handle the rest." Ebony thanked him, and they agreed to meet outside the courtroom. The local courthouse was a drab, square building situated near the city's municipal center. It had tall, tinted windows and aging brick walls. The interior was a labyrinth of winding corridors and bland waiting areas decorated with outdated posters about jury service. Ebony spotted Marcus near a water fountain. He greeted her with a warm smile and a subtle nod that hinted, "We've got this." The corridor leading to courtroom 2 was filled with the hushed murmurs of people awaiting their hearings' traffic violations. Small claims, minor disputes. This was a place where short, perfunctory cases were often handled in quick succession, rarely attracting public attention or media. But Ebony sensed this day would be anything but ordinary. When they entered the courtroom, Ebony saw Officer Carter at a table with the city attorney. The officer was leaning back, arms folded, wearing an expression that could only be described as smug. His eyes flicked to Ebony, and an unmistakable smirk appeared. Immediately, Ebony felt her pulse quicken. She recognized that condescending look. It was as if Carter had already rehearsed his victorious exit. Judge Harriet Alvarez presided over the docket that afternoon. She was known for being fair, stern, and unyielding when it came to nonsense. With well-coiffed hair and a slight frown of concentration, she read over the case files swiftly. Marcus and Ebony stood off to one side, waiting for their turn. A few routine cases came and went, speeding tickets and small fines. Finally, the clerk called Ebony Davis's name. She took a seat at the defendant's table with Marcus by her side. The city attorney introduced Officer Carter and ran through the formalities. Ebony's hearing had begun. Officer Carter took the stand first. He recounted the events of Ebony's traffic stop with a blend of casual dismissal and smug self-assurance. The defendant, Ebony Davis, switched lanes without signaling. She accelerated aggressively. "I believe she was trying to evade the stop initially," he stated in a measured tone. His eyes remained steady on Ebony, gauging her reaction. She became argumentative when asked for her license and registration. As a trained officer, I felt her manner indicated a potential threat. In Ebony's mind, each sentence was a twisted version of reality. She remembered clearly how she had signaled. She recalled being polite, though deeply confused by Carter's hostility. Yet here he was, spinning a narrative that dripped with prejudice. The city attorney asked him to clarify if Ebony had shown any specific hostile actions. Carter responded, "She kept questioning my reasons for the stop. That can escalate tension, especially in an urban setting." Judge Alvarez adjusted her glasses. "And what were your primary reasons for suspecting Miss Davis of wrongdoing?" she asked. Carter shrugged. She looked nervous. Her car had out-of-state plates. This area is known for drug trafficking, especially near the interstate. Ebony squeezed the pen in her hand. "Drug trafficking?" She wanted to shout in protest, but managed to stay calm. Marcus had advised her to let him handle any cross-examination. Still, Ebony's heart hammered in her chest. Carter continued with his portrayal, concluding that Ebony's behavior was suspicious and warranted a citation for reckless driving. When he finished, Ebony caught a flash of triumph in his eyes. He probably assumed this was going to be another open and shut case in his favor. When the city attorney finished questioning Carter, Marcus stood up, his face composed and confident. "Officer Carter," he began, "are you certain Miss Davis was traveling well above the speed limit?" "Yes," Carter replied. "Did you have a speed gun reading or any other evidence to document her speed?" "No, I used my professional assessment based on her acceleration and flow of traffic." Marcus nodded curtly. "So, no actual numeric reading, just your assessment." Carter narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Marcus flipped a page in his notes. "Could you describe how Miss Davis was being argumentative? Specifically, which words she used?" Carter shifted in his seat, then repeated vaguely, "She questioned my reasons repeatedly." Marcus paused for effect. Questioning the reason for a traffic stop is not necessarily argumentative, is it, Officer Carter? A citizen has the right to know why they're being pulled over, correct? The officer's lips thinned. "It's not argumentative if asked once, politely." She was insistent. It felt confrontational. The tension in the room was rising. Marcus then revealed Ebony's dashcam footage, a last-minute piece of evidence that Ebony had stored on a USB drive. The camera didn't show the entire conversation, but it picked up Ebony's voice calmly asking for clarification 3 times. With no raised tone or hostility, Marcus pointed out the discrepancy. Judge Alvarez leaned forward, frowning slightly at Carter. "Officer, can you explain why the footage does not corroborate your claim that Miss Davis was being confrontational?" Carter stammered. "The camera might not pick up everything. She could have made facial expressions or gestures off camera. Marcus's eyebrows rose. So now you're alleging threatening facial expressions, Officer Carter? That's rather vague. Carter's face reddened. He realized the dashcam was undermining his story. Ebony watched him carefully, feeling a surge of relief that she had insisted on using her personal dashcam, an extra precaution she'd picked up from colleagues who had warned her about racially motivated stops. After Marcus finished, Ebony was asked to take the stand. She recalled the incident calmly, explaining her background traveling for work, how she was returning from a late meeting and simply wanted to get home. She described her confusion at being pulled over and how the officer's demeanor made her feel uneasy. Marcus asked her about her professional background, but Ebony kept it vague, simply stating she was a policy analyst who worked in the public sector. She refrained from mentioning the White House. Marcus had advised revealing her workplace only if absolutely necessary. The plan was to let the facts speak for themselves first. As Ebony stepped down from the stand, she caught a glimpse of Carter's face, twisting in open disdain. The judge announced a brief recess before concluding the hearing. Ebony and Marcus walked into the hallway, mentally reviewing their strategy. Marcus sighed. So far, the dashcam is our strongest piece of evidence, but Carter's got experience slanting the narrative. If the judge or the city attorney decide to rely on his stated professional judgment, we might have an uphill battle. Ebony nodded. She felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. That's when Ebony's phone vibrated. She saw a text from Natalie Price, her supervisor at the White House. "Call me ASAP." Ebony glanced at the courtroom door. She had a few minutes. She stepped outside and quickly returned the call. Natalie's voice was urgent. "Where are you?" "We just got wind from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division that Officer Roy Carter is under investigation for discriminatory practices. They're looking for people he's targeted." One name that popped up was Ebony Davis. "That's you, right?" Ebony's eyes widened. "Yes, but how did this come up so quickly? Someone from the DOJ flagged it because you're a White House employee. They wanted to confirm your identity. Then it hit me that you mentioned a traffic case." "That's the same officer." Ebony exhaled shakily. "So he's officially under investigation." "Are you telling me I have federal resources backing me if needed?" Natalie responded firmly. "If this ties directly to civil rights violations, yes. The counsel's office wants you to remain professional and discreet, but they will support you if you need it. Call me if anything major happens." Ebony's heart pounded. This changed the game. Carter might not just face the embarrassment of losing a traffic citation case. He could be facing federal scrutiny for repeated racist conduct. Ebony's mind raced as she considered how best to handle this new development. When court reconvened, Ebony and Marcus took their seats again. The city attorney was about to make a closing statement when the courtroom doors swung open. A middle-aged woman, dressed in professional attire, strode in. She whispered something to the bailiff, who then approached the judge. Judge Alvarez read a note passed to her, arched an eyebrow, and addressed the court. "We have a request from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division to submit new information pertinent to this case," she announced. The entire courtroom buzzed with confusion. Officer Carter's face hardened. The city attorney seemed equally baffled, flipping through papers rapidly. The judge invited the DOJ representative forward. "Your Honor, I am Sandra Lowery from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. We have recently opened a formal investigation into allegations of biased policing by Officer Roy Carter. We've identified multiple complainants who cited discriminatory language and fabricated charges. We believe Miss Davis's testimony may add to the pattern." Carter bristled. "This is outrageous." "No one told me about any formal investigation." Lowery continued. "The DOJ is prepared to submit a request that all charges Officer Carter has pending, including Miss Davis's, be reviewed with heightened scrutiny. We do not intend to disrupt this proceeding, but we want the court to be aware of these parallel investigative efforts. The judge looked at Carter, then at Ebony, then back at the DOJ representative. We'll allow the submission of an amicus brief if it's relevant to Miss Davis's case. For now, I'll permit Miss Davis's counsel to question Miss Lowery to see if her statements have direct bearing here. Ebony's pulse raced. This was unprecedented for a simple traffic case. It was as if the cracks in Officer Carter's facade were widening for everyone to see. Marcus seized the opportunity. He asked Miss Lowery to describe the nature of the complaints. She mentioned repeated patterns, unnecessary escalation, discriminatory remarks, false reporting. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The city attorney attempted to object, claiming the relevance was tangential, but Judge Alvarez allowed Miss Lowery's statements on record. Officer Carter stared at Ebony with a look that could only be described as hatred. He must have realized his once impenetrable fortress was crumbling. His arrogance had protected him for years, pulling over whomever he wanted, twisting facts, counting on no one to challenge his authority. Now, a single case was unraveling his decades of questionable policing. Ebony felt a jolt of validation, but also an undercurrent of fear. She wasn't naive. A cornered man can be dangerous. The judge called for another short recess, giving the DOJ representative time to file the necessary paperwork. Marcus used the break to whisper to Ebony, "We might be able to push for a dismissal or even a judgment in your favor. But let's not overstep. The judge still has to consider the traffic violation on its own merits." Ebony nodded, swallowing the urge to sigh with relief. She walked out of the courtroom to clear her head. A swirl of emotions overtook her: gratitude for the sudden support, anger that Carter had almost gotten away with it, and worry about what might happen next. Staring at a faded courthouse notice, Ebony felt for a fleeting moment like an outsider glimpsing a system that was rarely just for people who looked like her. But for once, the system was showing a crack of accountability. Across the hallway, Ebony noticed Carter on his phone, face taut with frustration. Maybe he was calling someone higher up, trying to find out how the DOJ had caught wind of Ebony's case. Maybe he was just venting to a friend. Either way, Ebony saw him glance at her, and a thin sneer curled his lips. She could practically feel his rage. Let him snarl, she thought. I'm not backing down. When the hearing resumed, Judge Alvarez addressed the room with measured authority. Given the information presented by the DOJ and the evidence from Miss Davis's dashcam, I'm inclined to probe further into Officer Carter's testimony. However, I also recognize we have limited time in a municipal setting. For now, Mr. Green, do you have any final evidence to submit for Miss Davis's defense? Marcus glanced at Ebony, and they shared a quick, knowing look. He stood and walked toward the judge. Your Honor, Officer Carter has presented this case as if Miss Davis was some reckless driver on the verge of criminal behavior. He questioned her presence in this city, insinuating she may be involved in illicit activities. Her background, however, is anything but suspicious. At this juncture, Ebony stood. Though her heart fluttered, she spoke firmly. I didn't want to bring my professional life into this because I believe any citizen should be treated fairly, regardless of title or position. But it seems necessary for the court to know who I am. She then held up the ID card she carried in her wallet. I'm Ebony Davis, a senior policy analyst for the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. My job is to help shape policies that serve the American people. I hold top security clearance, and I've advised on issues directly impacting our nation. The reason my license plate is out of state is because of how often my work requires me to travel. I mention all this not to boast, but to highlight that Officer Carter's assumption that I was a threat was rooted in bias, not fact. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Officer Carter's eyes widened in shock. He'd never expected this woman to have such standing. The judge's face remained neutral, but her posture straightened. Even the city attorney looked rattled. It was one thing to pursue a flimsy case against a random motorist. It was quite another to do so against a White House official. Ebony continued, "Anyone can be stopped by a police officer. That's routine. But no one, regardless of their job, should be subjected to false charges based on prejudice." A long silence followed. In that moment, Ebony's voice echoed in the quiet chamber, and everyone grasped the weight of her words. Officer Carter suddenly rose, breaking the hush. "This is ridiculous. She's just playing the victim. Her job doesn't change the fact that she was driving recklessly. Now she's using her position to intimidate me. I'm the one who stands for law and order." Judge Alvarez shot him a stern look. "Officer Carter, you will address the court only when asked. Sit down." He looked like he might argue, but the bailiff took a step forward. Reluctantly, Carter sank back into his seat, cheeks flushed. His chest rose and fell with pent-up aggression. Ebony felt an icy dread coil in her stomach. "He's furious." Marcus calmly stepped in. "Your Honor, Miss Davis's credentials speak to her credibility. If she truly had been driving recklessly, it would be out of character. The dashcam footage also contradicts Officer Carter's statements." The city attorney weakly tried to restore composure. "We maintain that the officer's professional judgment should be respected. The dashcam might not capture everything, and Miss Davis's place of employment, while impressive, isn't directly relevant to the alleged offense." Judge Alvarez, hands folded, let a measured breath out. "I disagree. The defendant's occupation underscores the unlikelihood of her being involved in the activities Officer Carter insinuated. The dashcam further challenges his claims. Additionally, with the DOJ's ongoing investigation, it seems prudent to proceed with caution. I'm going to call a short recess to consult with relevant authorities on how to proceed." With that, the courtroom was dismissed once more. Ebony could barely process the abrupt shift in the air. Moments ago, she was another face in the system. Now, with her White House affiliation revealed, the entire courtroom dynamic had flipped. During the recess, Ebony stepped outside the courtroom with Marcus. Miss Lowery from the DOJ joined them, offering supportive words. Marcus turned to Ebony with a hopeful expression. "This might be resolved today, Ebony. If the judge dismisses this, we may be in the clear." Suddenly, Ebony felt a presence looming behind her. She spun around to see Officer Carter glaring at her. He spoke in a low hiss. "So, you think your fancy job makes you untouchable?" His tone was laced with fury, his voice barely above a whisper. "You people are all the same. Flash a badge or a title, and suddenly the law doesn't matter. You're going to regret this." Marcus immediately stepped in between them. "Officer, step back. You have no right to harass Miss Davis." Miss Lowery from the DOJ quickly reached for her phone, prepared to document the encounter. Carter clenched his jaw but backed off when he noticed Lowery's calm, watchful stare. "Everything okay here?" The bailiff approached, eyes flicking to Carter suspiciously. Ebony, her voice trembling slightly, answered, "I'm fine." Officer Carter was just expressing his opinions. She forced herself to stand tall, meeting Carter's gaze. In that look, Ebony recognized a deep-seated hatred that had likely tormented many others before her. It steeled her resolve even more. After that unsettling confrontation, Ebony retreated to a quieter part of the courthouse, where she discovered she had over a dozen missed messages from colleagues at the White House. Word had spread that Ebony was in a legal dispute with a potentially corrupt officer. Some messages were from staff members in the counsel's office, some from her boss, Natalie Price, and others from co-workers, simply sending moral support. One text read, "We've alerted the Secret Service out of caution. Let us know if you need any security assistance." The realization that she might actually require protection made her heart pound uncomfortably. Before Ebony could respond, Miss Lowery joined her. "Miss Davis, we're coordinating with the local U.S. attorney to see if we can expedite the civil rights investigation. I don't want to overpromise, but your testimony will be crucial. We've had at least 5 prior complaints against Officer Carter for racially biased policing. Most were settled or withdrawn, likely due to intimidation. You might be the key witness that finally exposes him." Ebony swallowed. She felt the burden of responsibility. "I'm willing to help however I can." Miss Lowery offered a supportive smile. "You're very brave. Not everyone has the resources or the will to stand up to someone like Carter." Marcus rejoined them. "The judge will be back shortly. Let's head in." Ebony inhaled slowly, bracing herself for whatever came next. The courtroom reconvened for what everyone hoped would be the final session that day. Judge Alvarez sat, her expression reserved but resolute. She addressed the room after reviewing the dashcam footage, hearing the DOJ's pending investigation, and considering the statements from both parties. This court finds that the evidence does not support Officer Carter's claims. Therefore, the citation against Miss Davis for reckless driving is dismissed. Furthermore, this court refers the matter to the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department for additional review in light of the DOJ's investigation. A ripple of relief and excitement spread through Ebony. Carter's jaw tightened as though he could crack his own teeth. Marcus nodded in satisfaction. The city attorney looked resigned, packing up documents and offering no further objection. Carter shot to his feet. "This is a miscarriage of justice. I have served this city for over 15 years. His voice thundered across the courtroom. Judge Alvarez rapped her gavel. "Officer Carter, control yourself." This hearing is concluded, but Carter was already fuming, pointing a finger at Ebony. "She's lying. She's using her power to manipulate the system," he shouted before the bailiff approached. Carter finally stormed out, ignoring the bailiff's admonition to remain calm. Ebony took a deep breath, tears pricking her eyes. She had won, and the relief was overwhelming. Yet she also felt a flood of empathy for those who had been on the losing side of Carter's abuse, who hadn't had a dashcam or the White House on their side. The case was over, but Ebony suspected her journey with Officer Carter was far from finished. The next day, Ebony sat at her desk in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, still reeling from the intensity of the previous afternoon. Her voicemail was flooded with messages from local journalists who had caught wind of the sudden twist in an otherwise unremarkable traffic court hearing, from community organizers wanting Ebony's support in bringing Carter's misconduct to light, and from acquaintances who were simply relieved she was okay. Natalie Price arrived, handing Ebony a short stack of memos and a coffee. "Word travels fast. People in the building are talking about you. And I just got off a call with the council's office. They say the DOJ will be reaching out." Ebony ran a hand through her neatly braided hair. "I can't believe how quickly all this escalated. I want to help, but I still have my responsibilities here." Natalie placed a reassuring hand on Ebony's shoulder. "We'll figure it out. For now, focus on your policy work. We'll coordinate with the DOJ whenever they need you. Also, there's talk that certain civil rights groups are holding a press conference. They want you to attend." Ebony gave a wry smile. "I haven't even caught my breath." She remembered the feeling of dread and empowerment that had battled within her in that courtroom. Now, the entire city seemed to be looking at her. Another swirl of texts beeped on her phone. She glanced down at one from Marcus. "Need to talk. Carter might be retaliating. Call me." Ebony's blood ran cold. Ebony took Marcus's call in a quiet alcove. "What do you mean, retaliating?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Marcus sighed. I heard from a reliable source in the precinct that Carter is livid. He's been ranting about you, telling fellow officers that you disrespected him. Some are just rolling their eyes, but I'd be cautious. He knows where you live, Ebony. He pulled up your info during the traffic stop. Ebony's heart pounded. She recalled the moment in court when he hissed, "You people are all the same." She had no illusions about how far an angry, biased cop might go. "Should I get security involved?" she asked. "That's your call," Marcus replied. "Given your position, you might want to alert the Secret Service or the local police. The last thing we want is for Carter to try something stupid." Ebony found her hands trembling. She inhaled deeply, willing herself to stay composed. "Okay, I'll let the White House security detail know." "Thank you, Marcus." After hanging up, Ebony leaned her head against the wall, trying to quell a wave of anxiety. She'd faced racism in subtle forms before, but never in a scenario that felt like a direct threat to her safety. Amid the tension, Ebony found solace in her co-workers' encouragement. One colleague, Laura Chen, invited Ebony to a quick lunch in the White House mess, an exclusive dining room in the West Wing. Over turkey sandwiches, Ebony spilled her worries about Carter's rage and her desire to stand up for the many he had wronged. Laura listened intently. It's not every day that a traffic stop leads to a DOJ investigation, but if anyone can handle this, it's you. Look at how you handled him in court. Your calm dismantled his lies. Ebony managed a small smile. I still feel a knot in my stomach. There's this old saying, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. I suspect Carter feels oppressed by the idea that a black woman fought back. Laura nodded. Exactly. But remember, you're not alone. We're behind you. They tapped their coffee cups together in a gesture of solidarity. That evening, Ebony received an invitation from a local chapter of the NAACP. They were hosting a rally against police misconduct in front of the city courthouse. Ebony hesitated, unsure if making a public appearance would escalate things. But she also knew her silence might let Carter operate in the shadows. After talking to Natalie and clearing it with the White House ethics team, Ebony decided to attend off-duty as a private citizen. When she arrived, Ebony was surprised to see a modest crowd of around 50 people, each with signs calling for accountability and transparency within law enforcement. A small podium had been set up, with community leaders and activists taking turns speaking. The mood was passionate but orderly. Several local news stations had cameras rolling. One organizer spotted Ebony and ushered her to the front. "Thank you for coming. We heard about your case. People are inspired by your courage." Ebony felt a bit self-conscious. She had never been the face of a protest. Her work was usually behind the scenes in government halls. Yet, seeing so many people gathered, some of whom had experienced injustice firsthand, energized her. During a lull in the speeches, Ebony was invited to speak. She took the mic, nerves fluttering. "I stood up in court because I believe no one should be harassed or charged unfairly. We all want safe communities, but that can only happen when police officers are held to a standard of integrity. We must support good officers who protect our neighborhoods and remove those who misuse their authority. Officer Carter targeted me because he saw a black woman and assumed the worst. But I'm here to say enough." Applause swelled, and Ebony felt tears gathering. For a moment, the fear in her chest loosened. She realized she was not just fighting for herself, but for everyone who lacked the resources and the platform to challenge injustice. Shortly after Ebony spoke, she noticed a figure standing near the edge of the gathering, someone in plain clothes who looked vaguely familiar. The man was tall, with a military-style haircut and arms folded across his chest. In a flash, Ebony recognized the face as one of Carter's colleagues she had glimpsed in the courthouse corridor. Her heart stuttered. Is he here to intimidate me? She tried to stay composed, continuing small talk with the organizers. The man didn't approach or cause a scene, but his eyes were locked on her. Eventually, Ebony turned to Miss Lowery from the DOJ, who had also come to observe the rally, and quietly pointed out the man. Miss Lowery frowned. I'll alert local security. Don't confront him. We don't need trouble right now. The man soon disappeared into the evening crowd, leaving Ebony's nerves on edge. She began to appreciate fully the risk she was taking. Officer Carter, with 15 years on the force, likely had allies. But I have allies too, she reminded herself, and the truth. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Be careful tonight. Don't go home alone. Ebony nodded to herself, grateful for the reminders of caution. Though Ebony had considered returning to her townhouse, fear convinced her otherwise. She decided to stay at a friend's apartment in a more secured building closer to downtown. Later that night, Ebony heard her phone ring repeatedly. The caller ID was a blocked number. She felt a shiver of dread. She picked up on the third ring, breath catching in her throat. Silence greeted her. Then came a muffled, masculine chuckle. You think you can ruin a man's life and walk away? You made me look like a fool in that courtroom. The line clicked off. Ebony felt goosebumps crawl across her skin. She dialed her friend, who was asleep in the guest bedroom. Within minutes, Ebony also notified the Secret Service's protective detail, which she had previously brushed off as excessive. Now, she couldn't risk it. The following morning, Ebony was met at her office by two Secret Service agents who were assigned for a temporary protective detail. They escorted her to a private conference room. Waiting inside was a representative from the White House counsel's office and Miss Lowery from the DOJ. Davis, the counsel representative said gently, the administration is concerned about your safety. Given recent events, we've coordinated a short-term protection plan until the investigation into Officer Carter concludes. The White House takes threats against its staff very seriously. Ebony sank into a chair, relief and anxiety vying for dominance within her. Thank you. I didn't want to believe it would come to this, but the phone call last night was unsettling. Miss Lowery nodded sympathetically. We're fast tracking the investigation, but these things take time. The good news is, we've already spoken to multiple witnesses. The officer's record is worse than we suspected. The council representative added, we also have you scheduled for a media statement in a few days, if you're comfortable. We want to show that our administration stands firmly behind you and against any form of discrimination. Ebony chewed her lip. I'm not sure about going public again. The rally was one thing, but a formal statement is another. The council representative gave a small, understanding smile. No pressure. But your story could make a difference. Ebony nodded, her mind swirling. She was committed to this fight for justice, but it felt like a heavy crown. A week passed in a haze of policy meetings and quiet dinners with Secret Service escorts shadowing Ebony. She tried her best to live normally, but the looming threat weighed on her. In that time, the DOJ collected enough evidence to consider pressing formal federal charges against Carter for civil rights violations. A hearing would be scheduled soon. On a crisp Friday morning, Ebony was reviewing policy drafts in her office when one of the Secret Service agents rushed in. Miss Davis, we need you to come with us now. Alarmed, Ebony grabbed her bag and followed them downstairs. In the secure parking area, she was told an incident had occurred. Officer Carter had tried to barge into the local DOJ field office, demanding to speak to whoever was investigating him. He made erratic threats, ranting about Ebony's role in bringing him down. Security footage caught him raging and forcibly removed him from the building. Miss Lowery phoned Ebony soon after. Carter's meltdown gave us the final piece of probable cause. The local authorities, along with the FBI, are moving to arrest him. We have enough complaints, evidence, and now this threatening behavior to take serious action. Ebony listened in stunned silence. For a moment, she felt both compassion for a man unraveling and immense relief that he would no longer terrorize others. She recalled the malignant grin he wore in the courtroom. His arrogance had been his shield for years, but he'd finally gone too far. That evening, Ebony was at a secure White House workspace when she received confirmation Carter had been arrested at his home without incident. Word circulated that the police department had placed him on unpaid leave pending the outcome of federal charges. The next morning's headlines screamed about racist cop brought down by DOJ investigation, featuring Ebony's case as the centerpiece. Ebony found herself reading those headlines with a mix of triumph and heartbreak. Why did it have to escalate so far for justice to be served? She thought of all the names in the community who had likely suffered in silence. At least now, a measure of accountability was in motion. Friends and co-workers texted their congratulations. The White House staff collectively exhaled. Ebony's policy team even surprised her by ordering a cake that read, "Justice served." Though Ebony appreciated the gesture, she was conscious that she was just one of many. She promised herself to keep championing reforms that would prevent such abuse from happening again. Over the subsequent weeks, Ebony's life stabilized. The protective details scaled back, and she moved freely around DC again. She addressed the press, standing alongside Miss Lowery and her colleagues. For the first time, Ebony openly discussed her position at the White House and her experience with police misconduct. Media outlets covered her story extensively, and Ebony used each opportunity to highlight the broader systemic issues. During one press conference, Ebony said, "True justice doesn't stop with a single arrest. We must keep working to ensure accountability in every department, in every city. We owe it to our communities to ensure that the shield meant to protect us is never used to oppress us." Her words ignited a public conversation. Soon, Ebony was meeting with grassroots activists, local city councils, and even working with the DOJ on broader policy initiatives addressing police accountability. A wave of new awareness was surging through DC, and much of the nation fueled by Ebony's case and the collapse of Officer Carter's once impregnable fortress of intimidation. On a brisk autumn morning, Ebony took a personal day to visit her family's home in Baltimore. Her parents greeted her with warm hugs, proud of her fortitude. They chatted at the kitchen table over cups of tea, discussing the media storm swirling around Ebony's case. Her mother, a retired nurse, spoke with tears in her eyes. So many families never see the day their child's abuser is held accountable. "I'm proud that you stood up for yourself and for those who can't." Her father, a former civil rights attorney, added, "You shined a light on corruption. Remember, Ebony, the real victory is in changing the system, bit by bit." Ebony absorbed their pride and support, allowing herself to feel the weight of gratitude. She knew the road to meaningful change was long, but she felt more equipped than ever to walk it. Months later, Officer Carter's federal trial concluded. The evidence was damning dashcam videos from multiple complainants, testimonies of intimidation, and Carter's own unhinged outbursts. He was found guilty of violating civil rights under color of law. The judge sentenced him to several years in federal prison. A small crowd outside the courthouse cheered when the verdict was announced. Ebony was there, standing quietly in the back, witnessing the final chapter of a painful saga. As Carter was led away, Ebony felt neither joy nor pity. She only felt a resolve to use her experience as a catalyst for positive transformation. Back in her townhouse in DC, Ebony sipped a cup of tea, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought of how the story began with a routine traffic stop that could have ended tragically. Instead, it unspooled into a major civil rights case that exposed systemic issues and demanded accountability. In her living room were reminders of the past year, news clippings, letters from supporters, a congratulatory note from the White House counsel's office. She no longer shook with anger or fear when she remembered Officer Carter's laugh in that courtroom. Instead, she felt strength. Her voice had carried weight, not just because she was a White House employee, but because it rang true. She decided to document her experiences, hoping it would serve as an educational resource for future generations. If even one person gains courage from reading about my fight, then it will be worth it, she mused. Ebony found new purpose in her White House role. Recognizing the need for reform, she pitched a comprehensive policy proposal aimed at incentivizing local governments to adopt unbiased policing methods, robust body cam usage, and improved citizen complaint review systems. The plan garnered bipartisan interest. Ebony collaborated with lawmakers who saw that accountability in policing wasn't a partisan issue, it was a human one. Before long, Ebony became a key figure in shaping national discussions about criminal justice reform. She traveled to different states to speak with community leaders, law enforcement officials, and advocacy groups. Each conversation fueled her passion. The sting of racism still lingered in her memory, but so did the collective power of a community united against injustice. 1 year after her courtroom triumph, Ebony received an invitation to speak at the very same municipal courthouse where it all began. A local judge arranged a seminar on ethical policing and wanted Ebony's perspective. Walking through the corridors, she felt a wave of déjà vu. She was ushered into courtroom 2, the same place where Carter once sneered, certain he'd crush her with a traffic charge. This time, Ebony stood at a podium, addressing a group of cadets, community volunteers, and court employees. She laid out the facts. Trust between law enforcement and the community is built on mutual respect. The story of Officer Carter is a cautionary tale. He broke that trust daily, and his downfall was inevitable. Eyes in the room reflected a range of emotions: shock, empathy, determination. Ebony ended with a challenge. I urge you all to remember, authority is a responsibility, not a weapon. Use it wisely, and you'll find communities that stand with you. Abuse it, and you will face the consequences. Applause filled the chamber. Stepping down from the podium, Ebony felt a profound sense of closure. She realized that sometimes karma delivers a swift blow to those who misuse their power, and in the end, justice can indeed prevail. Months blurred into progress. Ebony's proposals for fair policing began winding through legislative committees. The public, galvanized by news stories and testimonials, pushed local governments to adopt more transparent practices. Across the city, officers underwent new training modules focusing on de-escalation and racial sensitivity. Amid these shifts, Ebony took a moment to celebrate her personal journey. She reconnected with old friends, took a vacation with her close cousin to clear her mind, and even found time for romance, a gentle reminder that life was bigger than a single conflict, no matter how intense. Yet Ebony never lost sight of what propelled her forward, the determination that no one black, brown, or otherwise should be humiliated or endangered by those sworn to protect them. The memory of that first court hearing remained vivid, especially Carter's derisive laughter echoing in the cramped space. It was a testament to how quickly prejudice can morph into real danger. But Ebony no longer felt the sting of that memory. Instead, it was a reminder of what she had overcome and how far she would continue to go. And so, a simple traffic stop became the spark that ignited a major turning point in the realm of justice and accountability. From that tense day in court, when a smug officer thought he could humiliate a black woman, to the sweeping reforms that followed, Ebony Davis's story stands as a testament to the power of truth and resilience. Her unwavering resolve led to the downfall of corruption and the birth of hope for countless others. If her journey has shown us anything, it's that every voice, no matter how small it may seem, can rise to challenge oppression. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of courage, twists, and ultimate justice. If you found value in this story, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others who need inspiration, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that champion truth and uplift the human spirit. Together, we can shine a light on injustice and drive meaningful change.